guys, it's Economics here, and now I'm going to push out a video with regard to figure 4.2. I think this is perhaps more useful actually in your analysis than figure 4.1. So a couple of things just to point out. First of all, stating the obvious but nonetheless worth pointing out, this figure on the left is for 2014, which is an estimate, and this figure on the right is for 2013, and this is actual data. Now, even if this was not estimated data, given what we've seen from the remittances chart on figure 4.1 and the very steady growth path, that probably the data would be fairly similar, so let's not get too caught up and too hung up on that. So what have we got here? So we've got here some relatively very large economies by way of population, that's for sure, and then we've got the values of the remittances coming into these countries. 70 billion into India, just purely from remittances, 64 billion purely from China. Now, that is probably to do with the fact that these are countries with very large populations, many people moving out and then sending significant sums back into the economy. They're all fairly large, apart from what we'd have to say the Lebanon, which is probably by some margin the smallest, and I'll show you a little bit of data on that in a moment. And then here we have a chart which shows us the percentage of GDP accounted for by remittances. Tajikistan down to Samoa. And again, it's really important to note that these we're not really comparing like with like here, and I think it's really important to compare like with like, which is why I have produced this chart. Okay, let me explain what we've got here, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just see that we're in focus, more or less. So, see if this moves down a bit. So what we've got here, ladies and gentlemen, what I've done is I've taken the value of remittances for each of the countries on the left-hand chart, and I have found out their GDP 2014. So a couple of trillion in India. This is US dollars, obviously. 10 trillion in China, and so on. And then I've worked out, okay, so what percentage, that 70 billion seems an awful lot, doesn't it? It's an awful lot of money. But what percentage is it actually of their overall GDP? Well, it's tiny. In India, it's only 3.4%. In China, it's not even 1%, it's 0.6%. And as I've said previously, the exception really in the left-hand chart is the Lebanon, where it's knocking on the door of 20% of its GDP. Now, if you then compare and contrast that with the data in the right-hand chart, where you're given the percentage of GDP, so then what I've done is worked out two things. First of all, I've worked out what was their GDP, so I've just found that out. So we're talking about, this is in millions, so that's 9,242 million, so that's 9 and a bit billion basically. And then their remittances, if you work out 49% of that, their remittances are about 4.5 billion. Now 4.5 billion is very, very, very much smaller than India's 70 billion, yet it accounts for 49% of its GDP, whereas this enormous 70 billion only accounts for 3.4% of India's GDP. So I think what we can glean from this, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll try and zoom in on this a little bit so you've got a clear angle on this. What we can glean from this is that particularly for these much smaller economies, remittances are very, very important. But they're also, in relative terms, by value, quite small when we're comparing it with the likes of India and China and so on. And I guess you're going to get on extract 4, the comment question that you'll probably get is going to be something along the lines of, comment on the importance of remittances for developing economies as they try to grow and develop. So let me just zoom in on these and I'll give you a little close-up on them so that if you want to take a little bit look further at it, you can. So that's the That's for the data set on the left in figure 4, and that's for the data set on the right in figure 4. So this is G-Economics signing out on this one. Thanks for watching and keep subscribing.